It's Monday, and that so happens to be the day that I like to talk about monsters. And hey, it's the last Monday before Halloween. Hello and welcome to Monster Mondays. I'm Jeff Arbuckle, co-host of the podcast Film Seizure that you can catch each Wednesday at filmseizure.com or at a number of podcast providers online. This month, Monster Mondays has been looking at classic monsters with a different or modern spin to them. I've done a wholly new take on The Invisible Man. I talked about the surviving wife of Dracula. And last week, I discussed the wolves in the publishing business. But this week, we meet an awkward girl who dreams of meeting a man whose death a couple of 100 years prior was so heartbreaking that she swoons at his grave until she discovers a way to revive and rebuild him. Yep, it's 2024's dark teenager, sorta gothy comedy, Lisa Frankenstein. And hey, check it out. I'm getting a little bit more modern here with my episodes of Monster Mondays lately. A few weeks back, not only did I talk about that 2020 version of The Invisible Man, but I also talked about last year's Godzilla -1. And now I'm talking about a movie that came out this year. So how's about that? Lisa Frankenstein comes from Academy Award-winning writer Diablo Cody. Now, Diablo Cody won the Oscar for Best Original Screenplay for her very first movie, the surprise hit Juno. Right after Juno, Cody wrote Jennifer's Body, which at the time was not greatly received, but has since become a cult hit. It's a movie that will likely find its way onto this show someday. The movie definitely struck a chord for a lot of girls who dig horror and for a lot of guys who dig Megan Fox. But much like with that movie, I predict Lisa Frankenstein will also become a cult hit. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later when I get into my 3 likes, because something about the movie that I adore is absolutely what is going to resonate with a specific group of people. This movie is the first feature film directed by Zelda Williams. Now, Williams has been an actress for nearly 30 years, starting with a bit role in the Hugh Grant, Julianne Moore comedy 9 Months. And she got into directing with music videos and shorts before directing Lisa Frankenstein. And I think her experience in making music videos really helps with how she visually brings this movie to life. Considering that this movie is set in the 80s, I think someone who cut her teeth in making videos, directing it makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of interesting ways that scenes are lit, or the way that they're framed, or the way that they're a shot that I think really does kind of play to that kind of early days MTV kind of feel. Now, Williams is the daughter of Robin Williams, one of the most beloved comedians of my lifetime. And as a kind of cute little piece of trivia, it's said that Robin named her after the Nintendo game, The Legend of Zelda. And this led to the two of them appearing in a 2011 commercial for the Nintendo 3DS sequel, The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time 3D. Then later, Nintendo sent out emails to people who subscribed to their newsletters that featured Zelda and Robin playing the new Nintendo Wii game, Skyward Sword. That was also one of the Zelda sequels. It's very cute that her and her father often returned to that game and seemingly had some fun with her being named Zelda along with Nintendo. Now, starring in Lisa Frankenstein is Kathryn Newton. Now, Newton's break came when she was 14 or 15 years old when she took the lead in Paranormal Activity 4. Now, while I struggle to say that that's really a gigantic big breakout, it certainly was a popular movie, and it certainly set her on the right path, as she would later appear in the critical darlings Lady Bird and 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri. Both films came out in 2017. Both films were nominated for Best Picture the following spring. Being in 2 Best Picture nominees in the same year, that ain't too bad. It will likely get your foot in the door for auditions, and that's where our friends at Nintendo returned to this episode. I would say her biggest break came when she appeared in 2019's Detective Pikachu, based on the Nintendo Pokemon characters. Her and Justice Smith have basically been in tons of movies ever since. She followed that up with 2020's Freaky in a lead role opposite Vince Vaughn, which we've talked about on Film Seizure, and now she's in the Marvel Cinematic Universe as Cassie, the daughter of Ant-Man Scott Lang, and will likely be a young Avenger if they ever opt to go down that route. Along with Lisa Frankenstein, she also appeared in another movie that will likely also someday appear here on Monster Mondays, Abigail. But her career is definitely on the rise. And, to be honest with you, I just think she's the bee's knees. But opposite Newton is Cole Sprouse. Now, Sprouse got his start with his twin brother Dylan when they appeared on the TV series Grace Under Fire before moving on to the Adam Sandler comedy Big Daddy and then back to TV with Friends. It would be the 2000s Disney sitcom The Sweet Life of Zack and Cody that would propel Cole and Dylan into a long-lasting career where they would appear as their characters through several years on various Disney Channel series. Later, Cole took on a little more mature role on the CW thriller series Riverdale based on the Archie comic books. He scored one of the most popular roles on the show as Jughead. But let's talk about this movie because I really find this one to be a really fun one. The year is 1989, and Lisa Swallows is a teenage girl whose mother was killed by an axe murderer a couple of years before. And she now lives with her father, her stepmother Janet, and her extremely popular and always busy stepsister Taffy. Lisa is awkward and doesn't know too much about fashion or makeup, nor does she know many of the people at her new school. But Taffy offers some advice to her as far as what to wear, what to use as makeup, what looks good on her, and also offers her the use of her tanning bed, which she won at a beauty pageant, but it malfunctions and mildly electrocutes Lisa. Lisa confides in Taffy that she spends a lot of time in Bachelor's Grove, a supposedly haunted cemetery that's desecrated now, and where she spends a lot of time, quote-unquote, talking to one particular gravesite of a man who died nearly 200 years before. The man was a musician who had fallen in love with a woman, but that woman left him for another guy, and he died after being struck by lightning. Now, all of that backstory is not actually, I don't think it's actually ever conveyed to Lisa. Some of it is, but not all of it. But what it is conveyed to us through the credits at the opening, where it's all animated out in a really kind of cool animation sequence. At a party, Lisa drinks something, not realizing that it was laced with a drug, some sort of psychedelic. It was something her crush's friend, girlfriend, whatever she was, had, and Lisa took it and drank from it to look cool in front of this guy. While high, a boy that she thought was her friend and a lab partner of hers takes advantage of her. Despite being still quite high and in a dazed state, she runs away from the boy and the party itself and ends up at the cemetery at the grave of the dead musician, where she says that she wishes she was with him. That night, a strange bolt of lightning strikes that guy's grave, and he is reanimated as a zombie. When she comes home, she sees herself in the mirror, still high, still just frustrated with life, and she smashes it, which gets her in trouble the next morning from the bitchy Janet. After an embarrassing interaction with her crush, whose name is Michael, and that girlfriend of his, she decides to stay home instead of going out with her family to see a movie. And while she watches Day of the Dead on TV, the zombie of the dead musician guy busts in through the patio door. She thinks he's attacking her, but he's just stumbling about, I should say, puking green goop all over the place, including right onto her face at one point, which is pretty funny. But soon she discovers the zombie is actually not mean and is friendly, so she decides to take him upstairs, where she plans to hide him from the family. Think of it kind of like that scene in E.T. when Elliot brings E.T. home and has to stash him away in the closet. It's kind of a similar concept as that. But after learning that he is the guy she consistently talks to and visits he returned because she said that she wanted to be with him, thinking that he's found his soulmate finally. But she actually meant that she'd rather be dead so she didn't have to deal with all that crappy teenager life crap. But she cleans up the creature because, well, he smells like death and he's covered with mud. But after a good old-fashioned clothes-changing montage, the creature now has some clean, modern clothes to wear. And one thing that the creature sure would like to get fixed is that he's missing two things. He's missing his right hand and he's missing an ear. He can understand and sort of communicate with Lisa, but he's also without a tongue. So he mostly just grunts or moans. While he can't really speak to her, he can at least, he at least has some cognition to see that Janet is a bitch and that Lisa's unhappy. He picks out an outfit for Lisa to wear to school the next day, which turns out to be pretty good looking on her and gives her a bunch of confidence, including a lot of attention from Michael. That night, when Janet threatens to send Lisa away to a mental institution, the creature hits Janet with Lisa's sewing machine and kills her. He cuts Janet's ear off so Lisa can sew it onto him, and they bury Janet's body in his grave. Now, Lisa, she's a seamstress. That's what her day job is when she's working on the weekends. But she's able to sew the ear onto the creature, but the ear doesn't work and it doesn't really look right. But he makes a suggestion about electrocution. And, I mean, it was electrocution that killed him. It's what brought him back. So it clearly has magical properties for this guy. So Lisa sticks him into the tanning bed, and it not only rejuvenates the creature a little bit, but it merges the ear onto his head, and it now works. So now she gets another idea. That one guy who was her lab partner that took advantage of her at the party, well, she lures him out to meet him or to meet her after school. And so she takes him out to Bachelor's Grove. He basically says, oh, it's not a very Christian place. It's, to be left like that. And she's like, yeah, it's not very Christian, as in wink, wink, come on inside and you can touch all my girly bits, So, she lures him in with that promise. But the creature and Lisa attack him. They cut off his hand and then kill him with the axe as he tries to run away. That night, Lisa sews the hand onto the creature, puts the creature into the tanning bed, and now he's got a new hand. And he's a lot more coordinated, and he's growing more youthful each time he gets the electrocution treatment. But with the new hand, he can now play piano again, which is what he always did. He plays a little bit of songs that he's written himself. He plays the REO Speedwagon song, I Can't Fight This Feeling Anymore, while Lisa sings, which gets him thinking that they're starting to connect. But before any of that can happen, trouble arrives when Janet's absence is starting to be questioned. Now, when she was killed, she was supposed to be out of town for a conference, which was good for Lisa to cover up that Janet is dead. But now Taffy has tried calling the hotel that Janet was supposed to be at and discovered that she never checked in. And while Taffy and Lisa's father informed the police about Janet's disappearance, Lisa and the creature bond with her, allowing him to use her magic wand on her. And after she has an orgasm, they talk about relationships in life. Well, Lisa talks and the creature listens, but thinking that they are now becoming lovers, the creature is frustrated that Lisa decides to offer Michael her body for sex, because she, as she puts it, it's like, I got to do this tomorrow because everything we've done, killing Janet, killing that other boy that was my lab partner, I might get thrown in the clink for the rest of my life. I got to do something about it now. So he gets frustrated about that. But the next day at school, the police is around starting to ask questions about that missing lab partner of hers. And while it does kind of point towards her, Lisa refuses to answer any questions. So she decides to leave school and go to Michael's place because he skipped fourth period. She knows the two places he goes. He's not at the first place. So he must be at home. And the creature, meanwhile, at home, has heard on the TV or has heard on the answering machine, that Janet's car has been found in another part of town. So Lisa's dad thinks that she may be back in town. So the creature goes to get the car. The creature and Lisa end up kind of running into each other. She has him drive her to Michael's. But when she gets there, she discovers that Taffy and Michael are actually in bed together having sex. Pissed, the creature, after hearing Lisa kind of complaining and yelling and being mad about this whole situation, blaming both of them for leading her on and stealing him because, Taffy can't just imagine not having something of hers. The creature barges in and with an axe chops off Michael's dick and balls, and it flies across the air and lands in the trash can, which the creature takes and leaves. Well, he returns to Bachelor's Grove. Well, he was going to also kill Taffy as well, but Lisa calls him off, saves her, and they leave as well. Lisa drives out to where they find Janet's car. Taffy is terrified, but Lisa tells her thanks for being nice to her when no one else would, and leaves her to join the creature. Realizing that he is in love with her, she agrees to put the dick and balls onto him so they can make love before they are caught for killing people. After they make love, Lisa is electrocuted in the tanning bed, saying that this was the only way for this to end so that they can avoid being caught for all the nasty business they've done. But sometime later, Taffy and Lisa's father visits Lisa's grave and discover that someone has been leaving a lot of flowers at the grave. They don't know who. She didn't have many friends. They haven't been there that often. But Taffy is a little bit confused about something that's etched into the stone, which says beloved wife. Elsewhere, the creature is reading a poem on a park bench with Lisa lying across his lap, freshly revived. So the two will be able to live after life together, happily ever after. Now, let me select 3 things I like about Lisa Frankenstein. First, I'm not sure there's a movie more geared right to what I needed in a movie than this was when it was released. Quite frankly, having been a kid of the 80s, I often get frustrated with how much movies try to directly tie themselves to the decade and place their story into a specific year or around a specific event, and then try so hard to not only do that, but also pull in all of these other elements of what I call the nebulous 80s, to the point that it ends up becoming anachronistic. Something takes place in 1985, but they're talking about things that didn't come until later or whatever. It frustrates me. But this movie is so very tied to the 80s, but it doesn't try to go over the top with constant references to other 80s things. Yes, they mention Honey, I Shrunk the Kids at one point. That's the movie that the family goes to that Lisa decides not to go to, and she ends up meeting the creature. And there are a few other things, like they drop a reference to Kokomo, but it's okay. I mean, it's set in it's set in 1989. Lisa dresses like it's 1989. There's a style to this movie that feels like it was made in 1989 or 1990. Absolutely, there are sensibilities that make this movie approachable to those who live now and have no idea what 1989 was like. But, and I think that's one of the things that appeals to a lot of the younger people who like this movie, is that, it really does feel like what people think of the 80s without it being just constant pop culture references. It feels so very rooted in that time frame that it feels like it was made then. So this came along at a time when I really wanted to see a movie made that felt and acted like it was from a different era, but not consistently wink at us as if to pat itself on the back too much with just all of these constant references every few minutes. The references that are dropped in make sense. They appeal to when the movie was made, or when a movie is set, to make it feel like it was made at that time. It doesn't have to go too far off from the goth chic look that I have more to say about here in a moment, in terms of Lisa's new style, to place itself in a time frame in which the movie is set. And the title itself is a very nice nod and wink to people my age. You see, there were these things called Trapper Keepers, where you put all your folders in, and it was like a binder, but it also had like Velcro closures to it and everything. And they all had different styles to them. There were boy styles, there were girl styles, but the most popular style for girls were the ones designed by artist Lisa Frank. Lisa Frank did all these wildly colorful, cutesy drawings with cuddly animals or 80s psychedelic imagery. You get what I'm saying. And there is at times a look that is like brightly colored, that looks like something Lisa Frank would have done live action. And that's what I like about it. And my point is about all of this is I love the vibe of this movie, and I think a lot of other people do too. I think there is a younger set of girls in particular who will really like this movie going forward. For people like me, it makes me immediately think of movies like Heathers, Beetlejuice, with outsiders going through metamorphoses in popularity or comfort level with themselves or whatever. But for younger people, it just has that vibe that people have seemed to gravitate toward because it does look and feel like what the 80s were. It's what people want to think the 80s were. I even saw a girl at Indiana Comic Con this year dressed as Lisa Frankenstein, and it was kind of a wonderful thing because all that fits together so well. She was likely, Lisa Frankenstein, the character, will likely be kind of an icon for girls who are a little bit more weird and a little less popular. And I think this is, the movie that can draw people in that way. Second, I just talked a ton about the vibe of the movie and how it can be so attractive to people as a whole. But something very specific about that vibe that kind of captured me is the sense of humor. There's this kind of wild sense of humor about this movie. And I don't mean that the sense of humor was so funny that it was wild, or that it was so off color that the only way to describe it would be to call it wild. No. What I mean is that there's this kind of, this untethered sense of humor. 1 minute the joke is straightforward, or something physically happens that's almost vanilla while still being funny. It's a straightforward joke. It's a straightforward thing. The next joke might almost be like, cartoonish in the way that it's told or played out, if it's a physical joke. The joke that follows that might be particularly mature and, like the shadow of the guy's dick and balls flying through the air toward a trash can. In a way, the movie plays almost like an Adult Swim series that episodically sets its own sense of humor, depending on the scenario. I personally can be very adoring of that approach. It's kind of odd to say this because this doesn't work for everyone because, it does change its tones and some people can find it uneven. But to me, it comes off as real. One day to the next, what strikes you as particularly funny or amusing might change. So how I feel about this movie is a pretty good encapsulation of me saying that something tickles me. The tickle might come from a particularly a perfectly timed joke or a pratfall or an insanely obtuse, silly thing that just hits right. But seeing this movie a couple of times now, I can start to realize that this movie simply tickles me and it becomes a comfort to watch. If I keep watching this movie, maybe I won't laugh as hard as I did before, but it will make me feel good. Sometimes that will come from the vibe I previously mentioned, or that kind of wild, unbridled humor that tickles me, or maybe it'll just be the heart that sometimes winds its way through the movie. But it's kind of like this movie is a friend, and it's a kind of comforting, for it to be there to watch. And that's the best way of being tickled by something. Being tickled by something doesn't always mean that you laugh or you guffaw at it. And third, oh, come on, I got to reserve a like for my gal, Catherine Newton. She's adorable and exactly my style in this movie. If this had come out in 1989 or 90, she would have absolutely wrecked me in every possible way. 12, 13, 14-year-old Jeff would have spent the rest of my life in the next 30 years looking for the girl who wore black lacy gothy dresses with bright red lipstick and a silly kind of blossom hat, and wore her hair curly. I mean, I wouldn't have rested until I found that girl. I mean, she likes hanging out in cemeteries and pining for long dead, broken-hearted men. Man, I can dig it. I said it earlier, but man, it feels like this movie was made specifically for me. I mean, I was almost so transported back while watching it the first time that I felt like a middle school or early high school guy again while watching it. That, I mean, I was even thinking about girls in classes that I hadn't thought about in decades, trying to figure out if they would have gone to school, to the school dance looking like Lisa Frankenstein. She's the piece that ties all of this together, and going on and on about crushing on her is so vapid and shallow, but I simply could not care less. It's just a fun movie that makes me just smile watching it. Makes me feel young, which is a weird thing to say about a silly, goofy movie about a girl in a reanimated corpse. But damn it, it makes me feel young. But that wraps up this week's Monster Mondays. You can catch new episodes of Monster Mondays each Monday afternoon at filmseizure.com. And don't forget to follow Film Seizure at Facebook, Threads, Instagram, and Blue Sky. You can also subscribe to Film Seizure to get both the Film Seizure podcast and Monster Mondays at your favorite podcast providers, as well as YouTube. You can also check out my website, bmovieenema.com, to read new reviews every Friday morning. Next time, we go back to Universal for the only film in the Universal Classic Monster series that is in color, 1943's The Phantom of the Opera. Until next week, stay spooky and have a happy and safe Halloween.